Everybody sitting at home wants the answer to the same question. Did you murder your wife?
No, I did not. And I had absolutely nothing to do with her disappearance. And use the word murder, and yeah, I mean, that is a possibility.
A perfect marriage, a baby is on the way, and a disappearance that would expose a chilling double life. What began as a missing person case on Christmas Eve 2002 became one of the most haunting murder investigations in modern American history, a story of deception, betrayal, and the relentless pursuit of truth. In 2002, Modesto, California looked like the kind of place where tragedy seemed distant. Laci was 8 months pregnant, expecting the couple's first child, a boy they planned to name Connor. She was known for her warmth and optimism, someone who filled her home with color in anticipation for the holidays. Scott, a salesman for a fertilizer company, was calm and composed, often described by those who knew him as polite, confident, and ambitious. They had moved into a 3-bedroom bungalow on Covina Avenue the year before, and by Christmas 2002, their lives appeared settled. But beneath the image of suburban contentment, something darker had begun to take shape, something that would soon turn the Peterson name into one of the most notorious in American crime history: the disappearance. On the morning of December 24, 2002, Laci Peterson spoke with her mother, Sharon Rocha, around 8:30. She sounded calm and content. She planned to bake cookies, clean the house, and take the family dog Mackenzie for a walk. She was 8 months pregnant and due in February. Scott Peterson later told police that he left home about an hour after that call. He said he went fishing at the Berkeley Marina, about 90 miles from Modesto. According to him, Laci was watching a Martha Stewart program about meringue and preparing for Christmas Eve dinner when he left. Sometime later that morning, a neighbor found Mackenzie wandering near the Petersons' home with his leash still attached. The neighbor returned the dog to the backyard and noticed nothing unusual around the house. When Scott returned that afternoon, he said the house was quiet, Laci's car was still in the driveway, and Mackenzie was again in the yard. There was no sign of Laci. Her purse, wallet, and keys were inside. By evening, her family grew concerned when she did not answer calls. Around 6 o'clock, her stepfather, Ron Gransky, and Scott reported her missing. The case quickly spread through Modesto. Police and volunteers began searching nearby parks, fields, and waterways. Detectives Alan Brocchini and John Bueller led the investigation. They questioned Scott that night and found his demeanor calm and detached. There were no signs of forced entry, no clear evidence of violence, and nothing missing from the house except Laci. The search and growing suspicion. In the following days, Modesto residents joined police in a large-scale search. Hundreds of volunteers helped distribute flyers, hang posters, and cover the city with blue and yellow ribbons, Laci's favorite colors. The reward for information increased to $500,000. Despite the search efforts, no credible leads emerged. Laci's belongings remained at home, and her car had not been moved. Detectives started examining Scott's timeline more closely. His story about fishing alone on Christmas Eve raised questions. It was an unusual activity for that day, and his account contained small inconsistencies. Scott had told some relatives he planned to play golf, while others heard about the fishing trip. The change in details drew attention. Detectives also noted that Scott's tone during questioning was steady and unemotional. Detective Bueller later said Scott appeared polite but distant, calm to the point of coldness. Investigators began checking his phone records and tracking his movements that morning. They looked for receipts, phone logs, and surveillance footage to confirm his route to the Berkeley Marina. Each finding added to a growing sense of doubt about his version of events. Publicly, police maintained that they were treating the case as a disappearance. Privately, they had begun to view Scott as the main focus of the investigation. There was still no direct evidence of a crime, but his behavior, contradictions, and lack of urgency made detectives believe that Laci's disappearance was not accidental. A secret revealed. 6 days after Laci Peterson was reported missing, investigators received a phone call that changed the course of the entire case. The call came from a woman in Fresno named Amber Frey. She told detectives that she had been in a relationship with Scott Peterson since November 20th, 2002, and that he had told her he was not married. Amber explained that she met Scott through a mutual friend, and from the beginning, he presented himself as a single man looking for a serious relationship. She said that he was attentive and composed, often speaking about the future and his desire for stability, but her account quickly took a darker turn. On December 9th, 15 days before Laci disappeared, Scott told her something that unsettled her deeply. He said that this Christmas would be his first without his wife, implying that she was gone. At that time, Laci was still alive. Detectives immediately realized the weight of what she was saying. Her statement suggested that Scott had been preparing the image of himself as a widower before his wife was even missing. They asked Amber to continue speaking with him and to allow them to record her phone conversations. She agreed without hesitation. Over the following weeks, Amber recorded multiple calls. In them, Scott continued to lie about his whereabouts. During the early days of January 2003, while candlelight vigils for Laci were being held in Modesto, he told Amber he was in Paris attending New Year's celebrations. He described the city, the lights, and the crowd, while in reality, he was only miles away. Each call captured his calm voice, showing no distress about the disappearance that had taken over the national news.
Amber! Hey! You there? I can barely hear you.
They were just like, wow, I can't believe he's calling you right now.
Hey, I'll be in Paris tomorrow. I'm outside of Normandy right now. And hopefully the phone will better.
On January 24, 2003, Amber Frey held a press conference and revealed her involvement to the public. She explained that she had cooperated with the police from the moment she realized who Scott really was. Standing before cameras, she spoke with composure and clarity, saying she had trusted him and now wanted justice for Laci. The confession brought a new wave of public scrutiny. The discovery in the Bay. Despite the growing evidence, the search for Laci continued for months without resolution. Volunteers, law enforcement officers, and family members combed through vast areas of Central California, but there were no confirmed sightings and no physical trace of her. Then, on April 13, 2003, a couple walking their dog near Point Isabel Regional Shoreline, north of Berkeley, found the body of a male fetus on the shore of San Francisco Bay. The discovery was reported immediately to police. The next day, a jogger in the same area noticed a second body, this time a partial female torso lodged in the rocks. Forensic investigators sealed off the site and began examining both remains. Within days, DNA testing confirmed what everyone feared. The bodies were identified as those of Laci Peterson and her unborn son, Connor. The location of the discovery drew immediate attention. The bodies were found close to the Berkeley Marina, the very place Scott claimed to have gone fishing on the day Laci disappeared. The autopsies were conducted and confirmed that both bodies had been in the water for an extended period. Laci's remains showed advanced decomposition consistent with prolonged submersion. Her head, arms, and most of her legs were missing, but there were no signs of dismemberment by human action. The missing parts were consistent with natural decomposition in seawater. Connor's body was found with a piece of nylon cord around his torso. Dr. Peterson determined that he had died in utero and had been expelled from Laci's body as her remains decomposed. Investigators interpreted the findings as evidence that Laci's body had been weighted down and later resurfaced after several months. The proximity to the Berkeley Marina was critical. It connected the physical evidence to Scott's own account of where he had been that morning. After the confirmation, the case formally changed from a missing person search to a homicide investigation. Detectives obtained new search warrants for Scott's home, truck, warehouse, and boat. Forensic teams combed through every area he had used in the weeks before Laci vanished.
The entry of your front door or the entry of your little interior converted?
Well, not the front door, but that back door that we came in.
Right where the mop was outside of it?
No.
Where your dogs? The one out to your backyard?
Okay, you have the converted garage,
Yeah.
right? Then you have the kitchen,
Yeah.
and then you have a room with 2 chairs in it.
Right. Okay, then you hooked your boat up. And you know about what time you left Modesto?
Gosh, I don't know. Extrapolate what time I got that deal at noon, is that right?
Yeah, that was no one.
I assembled my mortiser. You know what a mortiser is?
No.
It's a woodworking tool to make tables. Maybe you saw it on the trailer there. About yay big.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just got that, so I assembled it. Check my email.
Inside his warehouse, police found cement dust, a homemade concrete anchor, and several circular impressions suggesting that multiple anchors had been made in the same bucket. Investigators also recovered a pair of pliers with a strand of hair that later matched Laci's DNA. They believe Scott had used the anchors to weigh her body down before dumping it in the bay. Police also noted that Scott had purchased his small fishing boat just weeks before the disappearance, and none of his family or friends knew he had it. There was no fishing license, and the trip to the marina that morning had not been mentioned to anyone except through vague references. The discovery of the bodies and the forensic evidence around the boat provided investigators with the chain of physical links they had been searching for. It tied Scott to the location where Laci's remains were found and gave the prosecution a foundation for their case. The arrest. On April 18, 2003, police tracked Scott to San Diego near the Mexican border. he was arrested at Torrey Pines Golf Course. His appearance was altered. His hair and beard dyed blonde. His car was packed with nearly $15,000 in cash, several changes of clothes, camping gear, multiple cell phones, and his brother's driver's license. Detectives believed he was preparing to flee to Mexico. His father later insisted Scott was simply avoiding the press, but for investigators, the timing and the evidence were too significant to ignore. Scott was transported back to Modesto, where he was charged with 2 counts of murder, first degree for Laci and second degree for Connor. The prosecution argued that Scott had killed his wife because he wanted freedom from marriage and fatherhood. The defense insisted there was no direct proof, no witnesses, no weapon, no blood, no confession. The court moved the trial to San Mateo County due to overwhelming media coverage in Modesto. It was one of the most closely watched trials in California history, rivaling the O.J. Simpson case in national attention. The trial began on June 1, 2004. Lead prosecutor Rick DiStasso opened by saying the evidence would show a man who killed his pregnant wife to escape responsibility. He described how Scott lied to everyone around him and how his calm behavior betrayed an unsettling detachment. The defense, led by Mark Garagos, countered that Scott was guilty only of adultery, not murder. Garagos argued that police had rushed to judgment and ignored other possible leads. He reminded jurors that there was no forensic proof linking Scott to Laci's death and that the single hair found in his boat could easily have been transferred when she visited days before she vanished. The prosecution's case was built on circumstantial evidence, but there was plenty of it. Witnesses testified that Scott changed his appearance, bought a new vehicle in his mother's name, and tried to sell the family home. Others said he added adult channels to his cable service and acted indifferent during searches for Laci. Prosecutors suggested Scott made several concrete anchors to weigh down Laci's body. Although none were found in the bay, forensic experts testified that tidal patterns could have dispersed them. A hydrologist explained that currents in the San Francisco Bay could have easily carried the bodies from the spot Scott claimed to be fishing. The defense tried to create doubt. They argued that Laci could have been kidnapped by burglars in the neighborhood and that Connor's body showed signs of being full-term, meaning Laci might have been alive for days after Christmas Eve. The jury listened for months as both sides clashed over motive, evidence, and emotion. By fall, it came down to interpretation. Could the mountain of circumstantial details, when stacked together, equal guilt beyond a reasonable doubt? The verdict and sentencing. On November 12, 2004, after 7 months of testimony and 6 days of deliberation, the jury delivered its verdict. Scott Peterson was found guilty of first-degree murder for the death of Laci and second-degree murder for the death of their unborn son, Connor. The penalty phase began weeks later. On December 13, 2004, the same jury recommended death. Judge Alfred DeLucchi agreed and formally sentenced Scott to death by lethal injection on March 16, 2005. He called the crime cruel, uncaring, heartless, and callous. Scott was ordered to pay $10,000 toward Laci's funeral expenses. 2 days later, he was moved to San Quentin State Prison, where more than 700 inmates awaited execution. He reportedly showed little emotion and slept poorly the night before his transfer. In 2005, a judge ruled that proceeds from Laci's $250,000 life insurance policy would go to her mother, Sharon Rocha. By that time, public interest had shifted from the crime itself to what would become of the man at its center, a man who still insisted he was innocent. Appeals, resentencing, and the innocence claim. The years after the verdict were defined by legal motions and appeals. In 2012, Scott's defense filed a 423-page brief claiming he had been denied a fair trial because of media influence, juror bias, and judicial errors. They argued that several potential jurors had already concluded he was guilty before the trial began, and that others were improperly dismissed for opposing the death penalty. In 2020, the California Supreme Court agreed in part. While it upheld his convictions, it overturned the death sentence, ruling that the judge had dismissed jurors without properly determining whether they could set aside their personal views. The following year, prosecutors chose not to pursue another penalty phase. On December 8, 2021, Scott Peterson was formally resentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the murder of Laci and an additional 15 years to life term for the death of Connor. In 2022, he was transferred from San Quentin to Mule Creek State Prison to serve his sentence. Yet the case was not over. That same year, Scott's attorneys continued to argue that a juror, known as juror number 7, had failed to disclose a history of domestic abuse during selection, creating grounds for a new trial. Judge Ann Christine Masulo reviewed the claim and ruled that there was no evidence of bias. Then, in early 2024, a new name entered the story: the Los Angeles Innocence Project. The organization announced it had taken on Peterson's case, citing new evidence and a claim of actual innocence. They requested new DNA testing on several items, including duct tape found on Laci's clothing. In May 2024, a judge granted limited testing on one piece of evidence but denied the rest. In October 2024, the court approved access to certain evidence for review. But in June 2025, an appeals court denied the Innocence Project's 140-page habeas petition, which had alleged that key evidence was destroyed or suppressed during the original trial. As of 2025, Scott Peterson remains in prison serving life without parole. He continues to claim he did not kill his wife or unborn child. For Laci's family, the fight for justice ended long ago, but the echoes of the case continue to stir debate about evidence, media influence, and truth. For Modesto, the Peterson case will always be a story of a community shaken by betrayal and loss, a reminder that even the most ordinary lives can hide extraordinary darkness.